Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Kindness Advantage. I am your host, Cindy Rowe, and in 10 minutes or less, we're going to explore ways to bring kindness into every corner of your life. Okay, I want to start today off with a question. When you hear the word kindness at work, what do you think of? Being friendly, saying thank you, maybe bringing donuts to the office on Friday. I mean, who doesn't love that? All of those are good things, and I am definitely not anti-donut. However, what if I told you kindness can also affect performance, productivity, engagement, retention, feedback, collaboration, even the quality of work people produce? Because I think that we have spent way too long putting kindness into the soft stuff category. It's nice to have, it's good for morale. It's something you focus on after you've handled the real business issues. Except, I believe, and if you followed me along long enough, you know this is true too, but kindness is a business issue. And there's research behind it. But first, we have to clear something up. Kindness does not mean lowering expectations. It doesn't mean avoiding the hard conversations. And it definitely doesn't mean everybody gets a trophy because we don't want anyone to feel bad. That's not kindness. That's often niceness. And if you listen to me for a while, you know I make a pretty big distinction between those two words. Nice says, I don't want this conversation to be uncomfortable, so maybe I won't say anything at all. But kindness says, I respect you enough to have the conversation that might help you grow. Nice avoids accountability. Kindness can actually strengthen accountability because you have expectations and treat someone like a human being at the same time. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. In fact, I would actually argue that the best leaders do both really well. They create an environment where people know I'm supported here and I'm expected to do great work here. And that is a powerful combination. Let's start with something incredibly simple: recognition. One of the easiest forms of workplace kindness is noticing someone else's contributions and actually telling them. I'm not saying a generic, good job, everybody, but specifically, I saw how you handled that frustrated customer. You stayed calm, you listened, and you found a solution, and that made a difference. Here's where things get really interesting. Gallup has found that when recognition is an important part of workplace culture, employees are nearly twice as likely to rate their team's performance as excellent. And well-recognized employees were found to be 45% less likely to have turned over 2 years later. Let's take a second and think about that. We're talking about something that doesn't necessarily require a new program. It doesn't require a consultant. It doesn't require another platform. Sometimes it just requires a leader to pay attention. That's it. And here's another Gallup finding I love. When employees receive feedback and recognition from their manager, at least weekly, 61% are engaged. For employees getting weekly feedback but less frequent recognition, they're only 38% engaged. Same feedback, different human experience. And that is a pretty significant difference. So let's get into the why. Why would treating people well actually affect their work? Duh, really. I mean, come on. People don't leave their humanity in the parking lot when they walk into work. No, we are human beings before we're employees. And human beings perform differently depending on the environment around us. Think about yourself. Have you ever worked for someone who made you afraid to make a mistake? I have. Or maybe they embarrassed people. Maybe they immediately blamed someone for something when it went wrong. Maybe you learned real quick that don't ask that question, or don't challenge that idea, or definitely don't admit that you screwed something up. What happens? People protect themselves and then they stop speaking up. They hide mistakes. They don't take risks. They don't even ask questions. They don't even offer that weird idea. They spend all their energy trying not to look bad instead of using that energy to do great work. And that brings me to psychological safety. Google's famous Project Aristotle studied what made some teams more effective than others. They looked at team composition and all kinds of different variables. And what rose to the top? Yep, psychological safety. I've mentioned this before. Not simply having the smartest people in the room, it was whether people felt safe taking interpersonal risks, asking questions, sharing ideas, admitting mistakes, and speaking up. And here's what I want us to recognize. Kindness helps create that environment. Listening creates it. Curiosity creates it. Responding to mistakes without humiliation creates it. Giving credit creates it. Respectful disagreements create it. Checking in creates it. And yes, accountability creates it too. Psychological safety doesn't mean anything goes. It means I can tell the truth here. And that is very different. Here's another way I want you to think about it. Kindness can actually free up capacity. Hold on. Hear me out. Imagine an employee makes a mistake, right? Leader A says, seriously, we've talked about this. How did you mess this up again? Now that employee isn't only thinking about fixing the problem, they're embarrassed, they get defensive, they're wondering who else heard that comment, they're worrying about whether their boss thinks they're incompetent, and maybe they're replaying that conversation for the next 3 hours. How much mental energy just disappeared? Now imagine leader B saying this, okay, this isn't the outcome we needed. Let's figure out what happened, what needs to be fixed, and what we need to change so this doesn't happen again. Here, that's the same mistake. It has accountability, but it has a completely different environment. Kindness doesn't remove the performance standard. It removes some of the unnecessary friction around reaching it. Do you hear me? And I think that's where organizations miss the connection. We sometimes think the way we improve performance is to push harder, more pressure, more urgency, more accountability, more. But people, we're not machines. That's what AI is for. Sometimes better performance doesn't require more pressure. It requires removing what is getting in the way of people doing their best work. That could be fear, confusion, disconnection, feeling invisible, not knowing whether their work matters. Those things have performance costs. Here's another really practical piece of this. Recognition isn't just about making somebody feel good. It tells people what to repeat. It's if I say, Cindy, great job. Okay, thank you. But if I say, Cindy, I noticed you stopped during the meeting and asked James what he had thought. before we moved on. That brought up an issue none of us had considered. Please keep doing that. Now, I know exactly what behavior mattered, and that's reinforcement. Gallup describes recognition as a form of feedback because it shows employees which behaviors an organization values and wants to see more often. So recognition isn't separate from performance management. Recognition is performance management. We're reinforcing what good looks like. And that's why I always tell leaders what you recognize, you reinforce. If you want collaboration, recognize collaboration. If you want initiative, recognize initiative. If you want great customer service, recognize it when you see it. If you want people helping one another instead of operating in silos, call it out. Don't assume people know you noticed. Tell them. And sometimes when I talk about kindness at work, I can almost hear the objection. That's great, Cindy, but we're a high-performing organization. Perfect. Then you should care about this even more. Yep, I said it. Because kindness isn't about making work easier. It's about making it easier for people to do good work. There's the difference. You can have high expectations and high empathy. You can be results-driven and people-centered. You can hold somebody accountable and still care about them. You can say, this isn't good enough without saying you're not good enough. That distinction matters. Kindness and high performance are not competing philosophies. Done correctly, they actually reinforce each other. I know. That's how I've built my companies. That's how I operate as a person. So I don't want you leaving this episode thinking, okay, Cindy, be kinder, got it. No, that is way too vague. Here are 3 things I want you to actually try. Catch someone doing something right. Yep. Not employee of the month, not a formal recognition program. Today, I want you to look for one behavior that contributes to the outcome you want and say something about it. I noticed what you did. Here's why it mattered. Thank you. Specific recognition reinforces performance. Number 2, I want you to replace judgment with curiosity. We've been talking a lot about curiosity. If you follow me on my socials, I've been driving this home recently because it is so important. It is a leadership skill we are missing out on. So the next time something goes wrong, before jumping to, why did you do that? Try, help me understand what happened. We talked recently about the power of curiosity, and then here's another place where it matters. Curiosity gives you information. Judgment often gives you defensiveness. And when you're trying to improve performance, which one is more useful? Yeah, information. And the third one I want you to try is ask one performance-changing question. Ask someone on your team, what makes it harder than it needs to be for you to do great work here? And then, this part is important. Don't defend, don't explain, don't immediately solve, just listen. You might hear about a broken process, a communication gap, unclear expectations, a relationship issue, too many meetings, a lack of resources, something you didn't even realize was creating friction. That's kindness, but it's also operational intelligence. And I think that is another part we miss. Kindness doesn't replace strategy. It doesn't replace skill. It doesn't replace accountability. It doesn't replace expectations. It actually makes those things work better because people work better when they feel respected, valued, and safe enough to contribute. I'm going to repeat that again. People work better when they feel respected, valued, and safe enough to contribute. So maybe kindness isn't soft at all. Maybe we've just been measuring the wrong things. Every time a leader listens instead of dismisses, recognizes instead of overlooks, gets curious instead of assuming, holds somebody accountable without humiliating them, or makes it safe for someone to speak up, that leader is shaping how work gets done. And eventually, those little human moments show up somewhere else. They show up in engagement, retention, customer experience, collaboration, productivity, and performance. Kindness isn't something you do instead of getting results. Kindness can actually be part of how you get those results. And to be honest, that right there, that is the kindness advantage. So, folks, thank you so much for joining me today. If you loved this episode as much as I have loved giving it, give me a like, give me a comment, let me know. Is there something that you want to know about with kindness at work or in personal life or something? I want to hear your thoughts. And if you haven't hit the subscribe button, please do so. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will end it like I ended always. Together, we create waves of strength through kindness. Thank you.